Welcome back to the Christianity and Business Podcast, an initiative of the Archie W. Dunham College of Business at Houston Christian University. I'm your host, Darren Shear, and this is the show that helps Christian business leaders to integrate biblical values into business. On this episode, we're joined by Skip Vaccarello. Skip is a partner with One Flourish Capital, a faith-based venture capital firm investing in technology-based startup companies. He's the author of Finding God in Silicon Valley, Spiritual Journeys in a High-Tech World. From 2005 to 2021, Skip led Connect Silicon Valley, a nonprofit organization that offers speaking events featuring high-profile leaders to encourage conversations about faith and life. He has over 40 years of experience in leadership positions in Silicon Valley technology companies, including Vaccarello, the provider of VisiCalc, which was the first, that really predates the Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yes.
In addition, he served as president and CEO of Applied Weather Technology, a global company providing software and services to the maritime industry. He earned an AB with honors in economics from Harvard College and an MBA with honors from Boston University School of Management. And I got to sit across the dinner table from Skip in Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago at an event called the Great Awakening Movement, and just really was excited about Skip's passion to see the Lord lifted up in Silicon Valley and the marketplace worldwide. So, Skip, welcome to the Christianity and Business Podcast.
Darren, it's a pleasure to be here. I enjoyed meeting you, and I enjoyed that conference. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, same here. So how would you describe the spiritual climate of Silicon Valley compared with the rest of the United States?
Well, it's interesting. Most people think of Silicon Valley as being, very, very secular, and to a great extent it is. I've some statistics that I've seen, and I'm not sure how accurate they are, but it might be that somewhere in the vicinity of, on a given Sunday, maybe 4 to 6% of the people could be found in a church. So it is a fairly secular culture. But I would say this, that there is a very strong, albeit small, Christian community in Silicon Valley, people that are really trying to make a difference for the Lord in that area through the businesses and through the various organizations that they're involved in. So it's, there is a strong group of believers there whose intention is to see God glorified in the world. But it is a very secular group, and there is I've said sometimes there is not an advantage to be a Christian in Silicon Valley, as there is in other places.
Wow, yeah, it's not exactly the Bible Belt, and so you have written this book on finding God in Silicon Valley, and you profile some leaders and their stories of how they live out their faith there. Can you give us some examples?
Sure. It's a book. Let me say maybe the purpose of the book first. The purpose of the book was to hopefully to have people look at the profiles of some of these leaders in Silicon Valley. And when they see their story, they might be attracted to them because of their success in business or in nonprofit organizations. But to be attracted to them and say, hey, if these people believe this, because they talk mostly about their faith in my book, then maybe I should consider faith. So that was really the purpose of the book. It was very strongly connected with, you had mentioned Connect Silicon Valley, which was a nonprofit that I had helped start a number of years ago. And we featured some of these speakers at that event. Again, we did it to open up conversations about faith and encourage people to consider Christ. So there are several, I have several stories. I think there are 24 or so that are in the book. And you asked for some examples, and maybe the best known example in the book is, his name is Pat Gelsinger. Pat is currently CEO of Intel Corporation, and people probably know Intel pretty well. Pat initially grew up in Pennsylvania, and he was a very, very strong, very, very bright guy. Went to Silicon Valley at a young age. I think he was the youngest vice president at Intel, and he was the mind behind developing a lot of the microprocessors that accelerated the personal computer industry, during the 80s and 90s. Then he had some other stints. He was at a company called VMware for a while as the CEO of VMware. But more recently, and I think it's probably been the last 2 years, he took over as president and CEO of Intel during a very challenging time, for the organization and the company. So I'd say the other thing that Pat did is when he came to Silicon Valley, God had put on his heart to help see Silicon Valley change in some fashion, change as a way to glorify God. So he really initiated the starting of an organization called Transforming the Bay with Christ, TBC. And TBC's goals were to unify the Christian community. There were it's really surprising, but there are some well-known pastors and wonderful churches, even though there are fewer of them in Silicon Valley, but to unify the Christian community. And then to encourage the community to perform acts of service throughout Silicon Valley, and to see more people come to know who Christ is. So TBC is a very active group, still there, and they act really as a facilitator of things, trying to connect people, and they do have events and so on, and they're making a difference. So Pat started it, and then now there's an active organization that's there. So Pat's one example. I could give you others.
Wow. I mean, that seems very surprising that in a place that is, I guess, known as being so liberal, would have a CEO at the highest level of a company like Intel that has started on a nonprofit that almost has like a kind of a crusader type approach to it. I mean, I would assume that he's come under a lot of fire from that. Am I right or no?
Well, he has, but he has. He seems to have. He's been pretty resilient. He does tell a story. This was earlier in his career, where he was, and I don't remember exactly the incident, but he was pretty outspoken. But this is while I think he was he was at Intel as a vice president, and he was criticized by the CEO at the time, and really kind of put aside for a while. So he sometimes in his talk he talks about being persecuted, but I mean he's such a dynamic personality and such a bright guy that his career was resurrected. But yeah, he puts himself out there, and he is not shy about talking about his faith. Not shy at all. We've had him as a speaker at Connect Silicon Valley at least once, and he is all out there for Christ. So he is, the leader of Intel, probably one of the biggest most influential technology firms in the world, and he is very outspoken and active about his faith. He doesn't shy away from talking about it.
Yeah, I guess in a way, kind of puts to rest to some extent the excuse of, well, I don't think I can, climb the corporate ladder in a place like Silicon Valley by being an outspoken Christian. I've got to kind of hide it. But he doesn't sound like one who has hidden his Christian faith. Is that often what you find out there in Silicon Valley, that people are kind of afraid to share their faith?
I think there are a lot of people that are afraid to come out and say that they're Christian. There have been, I've heard stories about where people have been, I use the word persecuted lightly because they're not physically harmed, but really, set aside because of their Christian faith. So there are several active groups in all the major technology companies. These are faith at work groups that I've had the opportunity to speak at a number of them. And people, part of the reason they get together is to see there's some camaraderie. There's a group of Christians who are at this company. It could be Facebook or any number of other companies that Google, and they do feel somewhat persecuted and where there may be some negative comments about their faith. So there is a tendency for people not to be very very upfront about what they believe. But there are examples like, as I said, Pat Gelsinger and others who are very, very happy to be upfront about their faith and making a difference. I think some of I would say this. I think one of the ways that you can help overcome any kind of, concern that people have is performance. I mean, you do a great job or wherever you are, and people will take notice, and they may say, "Okay, he's a Christian, but wow, what a great leader he is," or whatever else. So, that's one of the things that certainly can help, and that was certainly the case with Pat Gelsinger.
Yeah, and at the same time, I mean, the priority there is they're looking for top talent, right? And so, I mean, they're willing to, I think probably in a lot of cases, I would imagine, willing to overlook if you are sort of that activist liberal type that's going to kind of try to keep somebody down because they believe something different than you. If they've got the skill set that you need for your company, I mean, you got to have that person, right? And so, I mean, it sounds like just his work ethic and his talent it just kind of silenced a lot of the critics. Is that right?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And so, he doesn't when he has a platform, like if he's speaking for Intel or so on, he doesn't, necessarily talk about his faith at those, but he doesn't hide it. There have been a number of videos shot of him. He speaks. He's spoken at many, many groups around the country. So he doesn't hold back talking about it. In fact, he is often, critical of some of his peers. There's a lot of wealth in Silicon Valley, and he is very open, challenging some of his peers about, giving more money to the people in need, to the nonprofits and whatever. And he gives away a substantial amount of his wealth. But yeah, he's outspoken in that way about challenging other people, billionaires, and he's funny. He talks about it sometimes where they give away almost nothing, and he's some of his peers he challenges certainly.
Who's another person that you profile in the book?
I can talk about another one, Pramod Hawk. Pramod is a venture capitalist with Norwest. I think it's called Norwest Ventures. And Pramod was identified as being one of the top venture capitalists in the world. And they've been very, very successful. And Pramod has an interesting story too. He had earlier in his career, he was from India. He came to faith while he was there. And India, of course, is not necessarily a hotbed of Christianity, but he came to faith really through apologetics. He's a very bright guy, did a lot of research and figured out that, wow, Jesus is who he says he is. He's the Son of God. So he became a believer. And at one point, Pramod had thought about going into the full-time ministry. And he went to, I don't remember the name of the school now, but it was a school in the Midwest. Anyway, he went to get his MDiv. And at one point, a professor came and said something like, well, Pramod, this may not be the career that you should take, so, he felt compelled, but he wasn't, made up for full-time ministry, but he wanted to carry his ministry, in business. So he became a venture capitalist, and I say a very, very successful venture capitalist. Again, Pramod is another one that talks very openly about his faith. And we had him speak, and he's spoken around a number of places around the country. We had him at one of our events at Connect Silicon Valley, and the story he told was, I think, just amazing. He told the story. He had a daughter who was in her 20s, 25 or 24, I don't remember, who had gotten seriously sick with cancer, and he was obviously very concerned. I can't personally imagine anything worse than having a child maybe that dies, and she did pass away from this. But Pramod was, he was very upfront, talking about that and feeling very confident. I mean, what helped him get through it was that he believes, and she was a believer, that she is now in heaven. It was a very emotional story that he told about that, but absolutely convinced that heaven is real, and that's where she is. And that even though he misses her, that gives her, that gives him lots and lots of comfort. So, there weren't too many dry eyes in the audience when he told that story. So again, as a guy, very successful venture capitalist, and a committed believer and very, very upfront talking about it.
Yeah. Wow. And so you have a venture capital firm as well that you're a partner in, and you're investing in, as I understand it, faith-based companies. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say it this way: we're a faith-based venture capital firm.
Okay.
And we invest in what we would describe as entrepreneurs of character who want to run their business the right way. In other words, have the right culture in their business. So I would say probably 90% of the entrepreneurs we invest in are committed believers, but not necessarily so. We view it if they want to run their business by biblical principles, and we were happy to come alongside them and help them do that. But we also view it as an outreach. If the CEO does not happen to be a committed believer, and of course we never know what's really in people's hearts anyway. But if they're happy to be associated with us, and then we're happy to be investing in their companies. So, as a venture capital firm, we're obviously very interested in making money for our investors in the firm, and so we see lots and lots of businesses which are good businesses, but may not be businesses that are worthy of a venture capital investment. So we look at companies that have maybe a big chance for big success, but they also could go down in flames. So you end up taking a few risks that way. But the reason that we started this, because we believe that in many ways the culture that we live in the world, but in the U.S. is broken. And one of the ways that you can change that is through business. Now, obviously, there are other ways through education, through government, and so on. But business is one of the ways. And businesses touch many, many people. You have employees, you have vendors, you have customers, you have investors, and so on. So businesses that are run the right way, and I say the right way is by biblical principles, can make a big difference in the world. And also, there's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is businesses that are run the right way, and again by biblical principles, have a better chance of success than those that are not. Doesn't guarantee success. There are many, many cases, and I could tell you, a few stories about that, but doesn't guarantee success, but you have a better chance for success in the long run if you're running your business, the right way, as I say, by biblical principles. I'll just cite one study. A few years ago, the Harvard Business Review wrote an article, and it was, I think it's KRW was the consulting firm that did it, and they ended up doing some research of companies and of employees and looking at their leaders in those companies and try to measure the character of the leaders. They really did. They asked employees on a few characteristics of character, like integrity, compassion, forgiveness, and so on. A whole list of these characters, and they had the employees rate their leaders, their CEOs. And it turned then this consulting group went back and looked at the performance of those companies, and what they found was there was almost a 5 times greater performance of those companies that were run by leaders of character than those companies that were not. So that's one piece of evidence. And it does make sense. People, I think, are more motivated when they look at their leaders of people of character who want to do the right things. Then those companies have a better chance of succeeding. So I think there's lots of consistency. I read lots and lots of business books, and the principles that are often espoused are biblical principles. One of my favorite authors is Pat Lencioni, and you might know Pat has written many, many, many different books. And if you read his books, and he is upfront about his faith, is the principles that he talks about are all biblical principles. So anyway, and there are many other examples, in that way. So anyway, we try to invest. We look for markets that are potentially big markets, entrepreneurs that we would view as high capacity, people of character who want to run their business the right way. And that's who we invest in, and we're happy to come alongside and help them in any way that we can.
What's an example of a company you've invested in and how the Christian faith of the founder or just your Christian faith as the mentors of those founders really kind of shines through?
Well, one company I can mention, it's called Steeped Coffee. Steeped Coffee is, it's funny because we typically invest in high-tech companies. Steeped Coffee is, at the outset, doesn't look high-tech, but it is in a way. Steeped Coffee has what you might think of as coffee in a tea bag. But it's, and it's really good for, it's a single serve coffee solution. And there are others, this Keurig is a single serve coffee solution. But what's interesting about Steeped Coffee is that Steeped has the bags, everything is compostable and recyclable. Not like you have a Keurig container that you throw away at whatever, it's going to go into the landfill in some way. So the products that they have are good quality products, and the coffee is terrific. And they're now growing substantially. You can find them in a lot of the big grocery outlets now. I know Whole Foods carries them. We have an outlet here, Harris Teeter, will carry them. So they're really making lots and lots of inroads, and they also, you can buy it, directly from them. And they're organized as a I think it's called a B corporation, where they're giving away, their money is a big deal for them, for Steeped Coffee. So they're a good, and the technology is which I mentioned earlier. They have this way of getting this technology, getting their coffee packaged in these little containers. So there's a very sophisticated system. So they seem to be doing very well. And their CEO and their founder, they're running their business, and they want to run their business, by biblical principles. And we've come alongside, and we've offered we do offer some mentoring, and we've provided a webinar with them. So they're really they're very committed in their faith. Now, I can't say that the whole staff is, but certainly the CEO is, and running the business, the right way is what they're doing. So that's one example.
What's more evidence that they are running it on biblical principles, and what would be an example of a biblical principle that they are running it on?
Well, I would say one of them, I'd say a principle, at least something that I've noticed, is they're very, very transparent. They don't, hold back, with if there's good news or bad news, at least from an investment point of view. They're just very upfront with how they're doing, and they're really, very just upfront with what they're doing as an organization. I'd say the other is that they, they're generous, as I mentioned, they give away. I don't remember exactly the amount, but this is as a startup company. They didn't have a whole lot of money. They were, even at the early stage of the business, they were helping support some nonprofit organizations with the amount of money that they were taking in.
Well, let's camp out on that transparency aspect of it for a minute. Yeah. When you say transparent, you mean from your investors, you need to know what's going on in the business. Do you find that that's not always the case with a lot of founders, as they're trying to hide things from the investors, or what is it about their transparency that really is evident?
Well, I think a lot of people like to hide. They're very happy to talk when things are going well, and not so happy to talk when things are not going well. And I found that it was always a challenge in the businesses that I ran before I did this. But they in their presentations, they're very, very happy to talk about the good and the bad of all they're doing. They recently, so we invested maybe 2 years ago, something like that. But they recently raised some money through a crowdfunding platform. I think they raised $4 to $5 million for crowd. So they have now, I would say, thousands of people who have invested in this company, and they were happy to tell their story to these thousands of small investors. So they were just, again, I mean, I don't know how many, a lot of companies, they want to have a few investors. They want to spread the news around to lots and lots of other people, but they're giving these people an opportunity to hopefully make a little bit of money on their investment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's especially important. With all these crowdfunding, and I've done some of that crowdfunding investing before, and you want to know what's happening with this company right now, because there's one in particular that's really struggling right now, as they do. But that transparency is a hallmark of a Christian at the helm, I think, in a lot of cases.
Well, I think it is, and it's one of those, and there's you can't be transparent about absolutely everything. So I mean, some companies would, but you don't necessarily post everyone's salary on the bulletin board in the company. Although there's maybe a trend with that I actually might be happening. But I know in the businesses that I ran, I was always felt that I wanted to be transparent. When I would have, company meetings and get together talking about this is what we're doing well, this is what we're not doing well, and this is what we have to do. And it would be often the case where I might tell a biblical story that would relate to it. Now, these are all, I don't think very few people in the company necessarily were Christian, or the companies were Christian. But one of the principles that I felt was important, it was transparency in a little way. And that is that I always wanted to make sure that with salaries, for an example, that I could justify it. If the salaries were all posted and everybody knew what everybody else was making in the company, that I could justify it. People did make different amounts of money, but that there was a logic. People might not agree with it, but I always, whenever we would make salary recommendations, we felt that there was good reason to do that. And the same, I remember there's one company that I had that we did large contracts. These are OEM contracts. And in these contracts, there are all sorts of different terms. And sometimes we would get companies that would come to us. We were a small group. Big companies would come to us and they'd want what's called favored nation status. They wanted a special deal that nobody else got. And we always resisted that, giving favored nations, status to someone. And I always wanted to make sure that if all the companies that we cut deals with as our partners, if they all knew the deal that everybody else got, that it could be easily justified. Somebody got a better price because there might have been more, services that they provided or whatever. So that's just a different way of thinking about things. Feeling it's a sense of it's transparency in a fashion, but it's also integrity. Knowing that, one of my favorite Bible verses is Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, work heartily as working for the Lord, not for men. And to me, that's an important way to run your business. Is that God knows what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we want to. It's as a believer in business, you want to be able to run your business that way. As if you clearly we do work for people, but ultimately we're working for God.
Yeah. Yeah, and if people need to get scared straight on this and just that lack of transparency, I mean, think about Ananias and Sapphira, getting struck down for lying about what they had, and just thinking about the companies out there that they lie to shareholders, they kind of inflate their revenues, and these kinds of things, or hiding money from the IRS. I mean, I don't, just because you're not lying directly to Apostle Peter, and in turn directly to God, doesn't mean that this isn't an offense directly toward God. He certainly knows all about it. And so, I think that,
and Darren, I would find that in business, probably really in life, not just in business, is there are ethical situations that come up all the time. And so you could choose to do, and sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes it's a little bit cloudy, what the decision is, but it's, just thinking that, that as a follower of Christ, God knows what you're doing. He's watching what you're doing, and to be cognizant of that. I can just think of it very early in my career. This was actually before I would consider myself a Christian, but I wasn't. I don't think I was a born-again Christian then. It's a story. I was hired to be an associate director of a nonprofit organization helping handicapped people. Very good organization, very good reputation. And there was the person running it was a former Army colonel, very well respected in the community. So I came in as the second in charge. And when I came in, one of the things I was in charge with was the finances. And I found out that there are all sorts of hidden bank accounts. And they were hidden because if they were raising money, they didn't want to know, people want to know how much money they really had. And so here I was in charge of finances, and I found all this hidden bank accounts. And so what do you do? And, I could have quit. I could have exposed them. I could have just gone on and forget about it. It's a good organization. But anyway, I worked out with the guy that was the executive director, and we, made known at that point, the amount of money that we had and where it was from. And so we got all that straight and we're transparent about it. But I mean, that was one early decision, in my career. But I would say almost every day people are confronted with these, ethical dilemmas. And, what are you going to do about it? But keeping, cognizant of, that ultimately we're going to be accountable to God, that makes a difference with how we make those decisions.
Yeah, indeed. Where should people go to hear more about you? Certainly skipvaccarello.com. That's VACCARELLO.com. Skipvaccarello.com. Everybody go check that out. The book is titled Finding God in Silicon Valley, Spiritual Journeys in a High-Tech World. I know people can get that at your website or on Amazon. Anything else you want to say about how people can get involved and hear more from you?
Well, the other thing is they could look at the One Flourish Capital. It's just oneflourish.com. So the number one flourish.com. And, if people have, we're always looking for good businesses to invest in. So if anyone has any, businesses, they can certainly refer them to us. There are ways, either on my site, skipvaccarello.com or One Flourish, you can get in touch with us. So, those would be the places to go. And I just want to encourage, all the listeners that sometimes it may be a little bit lonely when we're out there as a believer in business, but we can make a difference in the world. We can make a big difference in the employees that are in our group and the investors that we have and the customers that we have. So I want to encourage everyone to continue to live out your faith in whatever activity you're doing.
Yeah. And I think what's so encouraging about your book is that it's not just a hypothetical, but it's actually happening. I mean, you got the president and CEO of Intel that is unapologetic about his faith. That's very inspiring. Skip, thank you for writing this book. Thanks for the work you're doing with entrepreneurs and for sharing with our audience today.
Darren, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much. Appreciate you having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if so, we would greatly appreciate it if you'd leave us a quick rating and review for the Christianity and Business podcast on iTunes. You can get more information about HCU's Center for Christianity and Business and sign up to receive free access to all issues of the Christian Business Review Journal by visiting our website at christianityandbusiness.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep integrating biblical values into your business.